Did you know that AI has reconstructed a lost part of the Antikythera computer? The calculations shocked historians. And when Professor Tony Freeth saw the numbers appear on the screen that morning in September 2020, his hands shook so much that he had to sit down. Artificial intelligence had just solved a puzzle that had tormented humanity for 120 years. But what it revealed made no sense. It was impossible. Simply impossible. In the silent room at University College London, 7 researchers stared at the monitor. The algorithm had processed thousands of fragments of Greek inscriptions damaged by time and salt water. Half-erased letters, broken numbers, corroded symbols. And then, like a puzzle putting itself together, the machine began to fill in the blanks. Venus. 289 days. 462 revolutions. Freeth felt his stomach tighten. Those numbers were too accurate. Frighteningly accurate. The margin of error was only 0.01%. For a device built when Rome was still a fledgling republic. When Christ had not yet been born. When humanity barely knew the earth was round. The Antikythera mechanism had always been a historical anomaly. Fished from the bottom of the Mediterranean Sea in 1900, that pile of corroded bronze defied everything we knew about ancient Greece. 30 interlocking gears. Teeth cut by hand with surgical precision. An analog computer capable of predicting eclipses, mapping planetary orbits, and calculating lunar cycles. But there was one devastating problem. The front part was missing. Disintegrated. Devoured by the sea. Only a third of the machine had survived. And in that missing third was the most important secret. How the Greeks represented the movements of the 5 visible planets. How they managed to calculate the irregular orbits of Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn without telescopes, without computers, without Newtonian physics. For a century, the world's best engineers tried to reconstruct that lost face. Michael Wright spent decades creating models in solid brass. Entire teams devoted themselves to deciphering every scratch on the bronze. But something was always missing. A piece of the puzzle that would make everything coherent. Until, in 2016, researchers found the inscriptions on the front cover. Tiny fragments of Greek text hidden in the corroded plates. And there, engraved in bronze more than 2,000 years ago, was the key: exact mathematical relationships. Precise planetary ratios. Numbers that any reconstruction would have to reproduce perfectly. The problem. Those numbers were too complex. Creating a system of gears that satisfied all those simultaneous equations was like solving a 10-dimensional Rubik's Cube. Millions of possible combinations. Only one correct one. That's when Freeth had the idea that would change everything. If the human mind couldn't process all the possibilities, perhaps an artificial mind could. They fed the AI called Ithaca every fragment, every measurement, every theory. They taught the machine to read damaged ancient Greek, to understand epicyclic geometry, to think like an engineer from classical Greece. And now, after months of processing, the answer was on the screen. It wasn't just an answer. It was a revelation that made Freeth question everything he thought he knew about the ancient world. Because those calculations shouldn't exist. Not with that precision. Not at that time. The room remained in absolute silence for almost a minute. Then someone whispered the question everyone was thinking: how did they know? If you're feeling the same chill those scientists felt that day, you'll want to follow every detail of this discovery that rewrites human history. Because what artificial intelligence was about to reveal wasn't just about gears and numbers. It was about who we really were 2,000 years ago, and what we were able to forget. The truth was brutal: that machine shouldn't work. Not with 1st century BC technology. Not with bronze hand tools. And definitely not with the precision that the numbers suggested. Adam Wojcik, the team's mechanical engineer, was the first to verbalize the obvious. Guys, do you realize what we're looking at here? To create a gear that reproduces the orbit of Venus with this accuracy, you need 63 teeth. 63. Cut by hand. With a tolerance of less than half a millimeter. He paused, letting the weight of his words fill the room. Mechanical clocks weren't invented until 1,300 years after that. The problem was mathematical, but also physical. Visceral. Planets don't move in perfect circles. They speed up, slow down, seem to stop in the sky, and even reverse direction. What astronomers call retrograde motion. To represent this mechanically, you can't just make gears turn. You need something much more sophisticated. Epicyclic gears. Small cogwheels mounted on arms that orbit around larger gears. Like moons revolving around planets that revolve around the sun. It's geometry in motion. It's three-dimensional mathematical dance. And yet, there was a bigger obstacle. In one of the fragments recovered from the wreck, there was a small bronze block attached to one of the spokes. It had a hole through its center. For decades, no one could explain its function. Some thought it was a manufacturing error. Others thought it was a makeshift repair piece. But Tony Freeth had a different intuition. That hole meant something. It had a specific purpose that, once understood, would unlock everything else. But what? The frustration in the team was palpable. They had devoted years to this project. Freeth was 68. Wright, who built the first working models, was retired. This could be their last chance to solve the mystery that had consumed their entire professional lives. And then there were the skeptics. Oh, the skeptics. When the team announced that it would use artificial intelligence to reconstruct the lost front face, the academic community reacted with suspicion. Are you going to let a machine guess how the Greeks thought? A renowned historian wrote in a scathing article. This is not science. It is science fiction disguised as archaeology. The criticism stung because it touched on a real fear. What if AI was just generating mathematically elegant solutions that had nothing to do with historical reality? What if they were projecting their own modern expectations onto an ancient civilization? But Freeth knew something the critics didn't. The inscriptions. Those damn inscriptions that the AI Ithaca was helping to decipher weren't vague suggestions. They were precise technical specifications. Like an engineering manual engraved in bronze. Venus completes 5 synodic cycles in exactly 8 solar years. Mercury returns to the same position relative to the Sun after 46 years. Saturn. But there the inscription was so damaged that it seemed lost forever. Until the AI did something extraordinary. It didn't just fill in the missing letters. It understood the pattern, the grammatical structure, the underlying mathematical logic. And it proposed with 72% confidence, Saturn completes 442 revolutions in 427 years. When they checked modern astronomical data, the margin of error was less than a day. In 427 years. How? David Higgin, the team's statistician, spent 3 nights in a row redoing the calculations. He assumed there was an error in the algorithm. That some contamination from modern data had corrupted the analysis. But the more he checked, the more solid the numbers became. Tony, he said one morning, with deep circles under his eyes, either the Greeks had astronomical records from hundreds of years ago that we never found, or they had a method of calculation that we completely lost. There is no third option. The research room had become something between a laboratory and a temple. Bronze fragments rested in padded boxes. Computer screens displayed 3-dimensional reconstructions. And at the center of it all was a question no one dared to ask aloud. What if the story we tell about human progress is wrong? What if, instead of a steady upward line from ignorance to knowledge, humanity had already reached peaks of understanding that it then forgot? The idea was disturbing. But the numbers didn't lie. And AI was about to reveal something even more impossible. Something that would turn that mysterious hole in the bronze block into one of the most elegant engineering solutions ever conceived. But before that, they needed to answer a fundamental question. How to fit 9 different dials, 30 gears, and multiple hands into a case that was only 3 centimeters deep? The answer would come from an unexpected source. And it would change everything. Aristidakinalis was 23 when he joined the project. A doctoral student in computer science, he knew nothing about ancient history. His job was simple: teach AI to think in 3 dimensions. "You don't need someone who understands the Greeks," he said on his first day, with the quiet arrogance of the very young. "You need someone who understands space." And he was right. Because the real antagonist in this story was never the skeptics or time. It was pure and simple physics. You can't put 30 gears in a 3-centimeter box if they're all on the same plane. They would collide. They would jam. They would destroy each other. The solution: a central coaxial output. Dakinalis spent 6 weeks programming simulations where thin bronze tubes could be nested inside each other like Russian dolls. Each tube would carry the motion of a different planet. Mercury in the innermost tube. Venus around it. The Sun, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn. 6 layers of information flowing through the same axis without ever touching. It was elegant, impossible, and absolutely necessary. But there was still that damn hole in the bronze block. Freeth woke up at 3 in the morning thinking about it. He dreamed about that little hole. What was its purpose? Why did the original builders put it right there, on that specific radius? One November dawn, he had an insight that made him jump out of bed. "It's not a hole," he whispered to himself in the dark. "It's a support." The next morning, he gathered the team with manic energy. His eyes shone with that dangerous light that precedes great discoveries or great madness. The hole supports a bar, and that bar transmits the movement of the sun to the moon's phase device. Silence. Then Wojcik began to laugh. Not a laugh of derision, but of pure admiration. "Are you saying they used a single component to connect 2 completely different systems? That's space-level engineering." And it was. Because saving space wasn't just convenient for ancient builders. It was absolutely critical. Every millimeter counted. Every part had to serve multiple functions. It was minimalist design 2,000 years before anyone used that word. The AI confirmed Freeth's hypothesis within 48 hours. When they ran the 3-dimensional simulation with that support in place, everything fell into place. The movement of the sun could be transmitted sideways. The phases of the moon could be displayed without adding extra gears. It was perfect. But there was an emotional problem that no one was talking about. On a rainy December afternoon, Freeth finally verbalized it. "The more we understand this machine, the more I feel small." The team stopped. That wasn't a scientific statement. It was a confession. "We pride ourselves on being the most advanced civilization that has ever existed," he continued, his voice breaking slightly. "Computers, the internet, artificial intelligence. And then we discover that someone, more than 2,000 years ago, with only bronze and obsession, created something that took us a century and deep learning algorithms to understand." No one responded. Because everyone felt the same way. That machine wasn't just a technical achievement. It was a mirror, reflecting back to us our own temporal arrogance. The presumption that just because we live now, we know more, we are more, we have achieved more. But those Greek builders knew things we have forgotten. They understood cycles we ignore. They looked at the night sky not as entertainment, but as language, as code to be deciphered. And they deciphered it. The Ithaca AI was now processing the most damaged fragment of all. A piece of corroded bronze that seemed illegible. But deep within its algorithms, it recognized patterns. Partial letters. Mathematical structures. And then, on a cold January morning, the machine spat out a sentence that made Freeth's blood run cold. "The cosmos is arranged in rings. Not in overlapping hands. Not in stacked dials. In concentric rings." This changed everything. Because it meant that the original user did not see the front face as a modern clock, but as a literal map of the heavens. Each planet in its own orbital band. Earth at the center. Moon just above. Then Mercury, Venus, Sunday Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, and out there, the eternal circle of the zodiac. When Dacanalus rendered this visualization in 3D, the entire room fell into reverent silence. It was beautiful. Not just functionally correct, but aesthetically perfect. A work of art that was also a tool. A tool that was also a philosophy. A philosophy that was also a machine. They weren't just calculating the heavens, Freeth murmured, tears in his eyes. They were building the universe. And then the AI revealed the final piece of the puzzle. The one that would make everything make sense in a way no one had anticipated. The one that would prove, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that the Greeks weren't just observing the stars. They were talking to them. The notification appeared on the screen at 4:37 a.m. Freeth was asleep when his phone vibrated. Then it vibrated again. And again. 7 messages in 3 minutes. All from Dacanalus. You need to see this. Now. It's not possible. I ran the simulation 6 times. Professor, this changes everything. When Freeth opened the attached file, his hands began to shake so violently that he almost dropped his laptop. The AI had found something no human had seen in 2,000 years. Hidden in the deepest layers of corrosion, invisible to the naked eye, impossible to detect without neural image processing. An additional inscription on the front face. 3 words in ancient Greek. Chi epsilon iotaro tau omicron upsilon deltaro alpha kappa omicron nu tau omicron. The hand of the dragon. It wasn't a metaphor. It wasn't poetry. It was a technical description of a specific pointer. A 7th pointer that didn't carry any planet, but something much more important, the lunar nodes. The exact points where the moon's orbit crosses the sun's path. And when those points align, eclipses happen. At 6 a.m., the entire team was in the lab. No one had slept. No one needed coffee. The adrenaline of discovery was fuel enough. You don't understand, Dacanalus spoke too fast, his words tripping over each other. This pointer is not random. It is designed like a snake. A writhing serpent that moves independently of the others. And when it slides over the golden bead of the sun. The machine warns you that an eclipse is coming, Wojciech finished, his voice hoarse with excitement. But there was more. There was always more. The AI had processed all the known fragments and found something that humans had classified as unimportant decoration, traces of pigment. Deep blue in one place. Turquoise green in another. Corroded gold in a third. These weren't decorations. They were color codes. The sun had a golden bead, Freeth said slowly, putting together the final puzzle piece. Venus carried a deep blue marker. Mercury was turquoise. Huygens understood first. It was a visual identification system. On a face where 9 readings are moving simultaneously, color and size help you track what you need without getting lost. User interface design. In bronze. In the 1st century BC. The room fell into absolute silence. Then Freeth asked the question no one wanted to ask. Who were these people? Because this was not the work of a single isolated genius. It was not luck. It was not accident. It was the product of an entire scientific tradition. Generations of sky watchers, mathematicians, engineers, craftsmen, an entire civilization dedicated to understanding the cosmos. And then we lost it all. You know what kills me? Wojciech said, his voice breaking. It's not that they did this. It's that we forgot they did. For 1,300 years, humanity had nothing remotely like this. Nothing. We built cathedrals, but we couldn't predict eclipses. We fought wars, but we didn't know where the planets would be next week. He paused, quickly wiping his eyes. And this machine was at the bottom of the sea all this time. Screaming. telling us that we were once capable of more. Much more. The final simulation was ready. Dacanalus pressed enter and everyone gathered around the screen. The Antikythera mechanism came to digital life. The crank turned. The gears turned. The concentric rings danced in perfect sync. The golden bead of the sun slid through the zodiac, marking the seasons. The moon ball changed its phases. Mercury zigzagged in its characteristic retrograde motion. And there, snaking through it all, the dragon's hand crept toward the sun. A season of eclipse was approaching. "It's perfect," someone whispered. And it was. Mathematically. Mechanically. Philosophically. But the real twist came when the AI ran one last analysis. One that no one had asked for. One that it generated on its own initiative because its algorithms detected a pattern that needed to be explored. The machine compared the accuracy of the Greek calculations with modern astronomical observations. And it found something impossible. For Saturn to achieve that accuracy of 442 revolutions in 427 years, the Greeks would have needed at least 200 years of continuous, accurate observations. For Jupiter, 150 years. For eclipse cycles, at least 300 years. "This means," Freeth said slowly, letting the words settle like stones, "that they had an unbroken astronomical tradition of at least 3 centuries. 3 centuries of people looking at the sky every night. Recording. Calculating. Passing on the knowledge. And then," Higgin added grimly, "it was all wiped out. The Library of Alexandria burned. The philosophical schools closed. Knowledge fragmented into smaller and smaller pieces until only shadows remained. And a single machine, lost in a shipwreck, survived to bear witness to what we were capable of. But now, through the digital eyes of artificial intelligence, through algorithms that had learned to read the impossible, the machine spoke again. And its message was crystal clear. The ancient Greeks were not primitive lucky people. They were not lucky mystics. They were scientists. They were engineers. They were system designers. They understood the universe not through myths, but through mathematics. Not through capricious gods, but through predictable, mechanical cycles. They built an analog computer that would not be matched for 1,300 years. And the only reason we know this now is because another form of intelligence, artificial, digital, trained on patterns that no human alone could process, managed to reconstruct what the sea had tried to destroy. "Do you realize what we've just proven?" Freeth asked, tears now flowing freely. "Artificial intelligence hasn't replaced human intelligence. It has resurrected human intelligence that we thought was dead." And in that moment, in the quiet room in London, 2,000 years collapsed into nothingness. The Greeks were there with them. Watching. Approving. Finally understood. Justice had not only been done. It had been transcended. 3 months after the discovery, the paper was published in Nature Scientific Reports. 52 pages of mathematics, engineering, and rewritten history. The global scientific community stopped. There were no skeptics this time. There were no doubts. The numbers were irrefutable. The reconstruction was perfect. AI had done what generations of humans had failed to do: give voice again to the silence of 2 millennia. But for Freeth, the real conclusion came at a much more intimate moment. He was alone in the Archaeological Museum in Athens, 2 weeks after publication. He had traveled there especially to see the real fragments again. Not as a scientist this time. As a pilgrim. The bronze pieces rested in their climate-controlled display cases, softly lit. Corroded. Broken. Imperfect. And yet, now he saw what was really there. Not the wreckage of a shipwreck. But a message in a bottle thrown through time. A message that said, "We exist. We think. We understand. And you are not alone in this quest to understand the universe." Freeth touched the glass of the display case with his fingertips. And for the first time in his entire career, he didn't think about the past. He thought about the future. Because if the Greeks could achieve so much with so little, what did that say about us? About what we are capable of when we combine human obsession with tools that amplify our intelligence rather than replace it. AI didn't steal this discovery from humans. It gave it back to humans. It was the bridge between two types of intelligence separated by 20 centuries. The ancient mind that built the machine and the modern mind that finally understood it. And in the middle of that bridge was something profoundly simple and profoundly forgotten. Pure curiosity. The desire to know, not for profit, not for power, but because the universe is there, spinning above our heads, whispering its secrets to anyone who will listen. The Greeks listened. And they built an instrument to capture what they heard. We forgot. And we built an instrument to remember what we forgot. There is a symmetry in this that transcends irony. It's almost poetic. Dakanales, the young programmer, put it this way in an interview. People ask me if I'm afraid that AI will replace us. But look at what it just did. It showed us that we were already incredible before. It didn't erase human history. It illuminated it. And he was right. Because the real gift of the Antikythera mechanism is not the gears. It's not the calculations. It's not even the machine itself. It's proof that oblivion is not permanent. That lost knowledge can be rediscovered. That civilizations may fall, libraries may burn, seas may swallow entire treasures, but if a single fragment survives, if a single voice refuses to give up, the truth finds its way back. The Antikythera mechanism sank sometime between 60 and 70 BC. It lay at the bottom of the sea for 2,000 years. It was found by accident. It was ignored for decades. It was misunderstood for a century. And yet, here we are, finally understanding. This says something fundamental about resilience. Not just of objects, but of ideas, of knowledge, of truth. You can't kill it. You can only delay it. Today, if you visit the National Archaeological Museum in Athens, you'll see a new plaque next to the fragments. It doesn't just talk about what the machine does. It talks about what it means. This device represents not only technical achievement, but human continuity. The same curiosity that led its creators to build it is the curiosity that led us to understand it. 2,000 years. One question. Many minds. One answer. And below, in smaller letters, a recent edition, rebuilt with the assistance of artificial intelligence. 2021. Not made by AI. With the assistance of AI. Because in the end, this has always been a human story. About ancient humans who refused to accept that the sky was random. About modern humans who refused to accept that the past was dead. And about a tool, first made of bronze, then silicon, that amplified what was already inside us. The ability to look at chaos and find patterns. To look at the impossible and build bridges. To look at the forgotten and remember. Freeth is 71 now. He says this was his last big project. But in interviews, he always ends with the same rhetorical question. How many other messages are waiting? How many other fragments of bronze, stone, clay are in museums around the world, classified as debris or unknown purpose, when in fact they are portals to knowledge we thought was lost? It's a question that should keep us awake at night. Not out of anxiety, but out of possibility. Because if a drowned machine can be resurrected, if corroded letters can speak again, if algorithms can learn to read dead languages and reconstruct forgotten thoughts, then nothing is truly lost. Just waiting. Waiting for someone curious enough to ask, stubborn enough to search, and humble enough to accept help, even if that help comes from intelligence we don't recognize as our own. The Greeks built a machine to predict the future by observing the past. We built a machine to reconstruct the past and, in doing so, illuminate our future. Perhaps that is the true lesson of the Antikythera mechanism. Not that we should be afraid to forget, but that we should have the courage to remember. Even when remembering hurts. Even when remembering shows us that we are not as special as we thought. Even when remembering forces us to admit that our ancestors, with primitive tools and infinite time, achieved what we, with advanced technology and constant haste, still struggle to understand. And if this story touched something in you, if it made you look at the sky with new eyes or question what else we have forgotten, then you are part of that same tradition. The tradition of curiosity that connects Freeth to the anonymous Greeks who built that impossible machine. And maybe, just maybe, you should subscribe to this channel. Because if there are more stories like this waiting to be told, stories of humans doing the impossible, of knowledge rising from the ashes, of bridges being built between the past and the future, you'll want to be here when we find them. Because the next message in a bottle may be closer than you think. And it may be waiting for you.